Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to the day 2 session of Soapbox by Creative Club. Yesterday we had a very exciting session. We had a presentation by Patrick Gomes, CEO of Digitex Plus, and then we had general discussions with professionals from around the continent. And today again, we'll be having a presentation. But meanwhile, for those who are attending for the first time, let me just go through what Creative Club is all about. And my name is Nnamdi Ndu. I'm the CEO of Chini Africa. So Creative Club is an idea that came up some years ago when we partnered with Archive. We wanted a way to share some of the campaigns that they published in each of the volumes. So we came up with that idea initially to discuss some of the campaigns that are published in each volume. Then it took a life of its own. And today we have the Connect Cafe, which is the in-person version. And then and we've had sessions in Lagos, Accra, Dubai, and Cannes. It's difficult to organize this in-person sessions in various cities, but the whole idea is to be able to take it around as much as possible. So maybe post-COVID, we might think of some more likely cities that would like to host the Connect Cafe. Then the Soapbox, it's the monthly webinar series presented under the Creative Club platform. And it started in May, and we've been having very exciting sessions. And the parent company is Chini Africa, and we are Cannes Lions representatives in Nigeria. The other partners we have, I mentioned already, Latest Archive, and we also partner on some programs with the Miami Art School. We have other programs or other platforms, Culture Code being one of them, and that provides detailed training programs. For instance, here we can only talk about topics, but in Culture Code, you have a session lasting up to 10 weeks. So you have detailed study programs with certification at the end of the program. Creativity Week is a content program of Chini Africa. And then our major celebratory event, which is the Picture Festival of Creativity. As an annual event that celebrates excellence in the creative communications industry. So that's about all that we do at Chini Africa. And today we'll be continuing on the discussion that we started yesterday, which is developing the successful media strategy. And presenting today will be Edem Zokoto, Chief Strategy Officer, Dentsu Aegis Network, Ghana. We're also expecting Caroline Ndirangu. Hopefully she might be able to join us. And she's the Business Unit Head, iProspect, Nairobi, Kenya. Of course, those that also spoke yesterday, Patrick is around as well. And we might that they will join in the conversation at the end of the presentation. So welcome to you all. What we do, if you have questions, please type it in the chat option and then send it. We'll read it out and try to answer the questions. But during the discussion segment, if you like to speak, you could raise your hand. You will be unmuted and you'll be able to use the microphone. Thank you. So I'd like to hand over now to Edem.
Thank you, Nnamdi. Hi, everyone. Greetings from Accra. It's good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are available. Just trying to see where I need to share. Give me a second. So I'll just delve right into it. So yes, the task at hand is we're going to talk about developing the successful media strategy. As much as possible, I'm going to keep the conversation very practical um, and give as many examples as possible and real life scenarios. Um, my background, I have the benefit of having worked on both sides of the aisle. I've worked client side and currently working agency side. And so I sort of earn the right to talk across the aisle. So you see me swaying both ways as we go along. I will talk about some of the pitfalls and the issues we're having from both sides of the aisle in terms of how we bring this process of building or developing a successful media strategy to life. So first, let's just go into some keywords. Um, we're developing, so it's a process. It's a process of creation. We want to develop something that is successful, so definitely has to deliver to objective or the goals at hand. The vehicle we're using is media, which is a means of mass communication to various targets. And the output we want to develop is a strategy. So, what is a strategy? It's a plan of action designed to achieve a long term or overall aim. One collective word we want to use for that is objective. Another definition is a plan, a method, or a series of maneuvers for obtaining a specific result or goal, or again, objective. There are several types of strategies, and strategies feed from and feed into each other. So the example here, or the levels that we have here, include what you have as a corporate level strategy, which would be more like a multinational statement of the strategy for the business. So if you take Coke, for instance, and I stand to be corrected, but if Coke's purpose or strategy is to deliver refreshment across the world, that becomes the overarching strategy that now feeds into or other strategies feed off of. So your local market or in-market strategy would therefore be feeding into that process of refreshing the world, looking at the local market context and taking that into consideration in developing the in-market strategy. And then you now go into your functional level. So every function within that business, in that market business, will have a strategy that feeds into delivery of the business strategy that also feeds into the delivery of the corporate level strategy. So you have your marketing strategies that fall under your functional level. And then even within your marketing function, you now have operational level strategy. So you now have your brand strategy, you have campaign strategy, and one thing that feeds into that also is your media strategy. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It's very important to talk about the basics. One famous quote by Albert Einstein was that if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spent about 55 minutes thinking, analyzing, understanding the problem, and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. This statement is very profound, and for me, the way we have structured this conversation or this presentation is to really delve and do a proper analysis of what the issue is at hand, understanding the problem, and on the basis of that, we progress into what the solution would be, and therefore the creation of the strategy itself. So, just like the saying goes, the tip of the iceberg, just like a building, what you see, the superstructure really is sitting on a foundation. The foundation is really the most important part of the building. Without a strong foundation, the superstructure could come crumbling down at any point in time. And therefore, it's really important that we get the foundation right in the process of developing a strategy or a media strategy specifically. So we go into the building blocks of what the process of developing a media strategy is. So we want to define the problem. So what's the beginning of the process? I'm sure we all understand that it starts with a brief, and the brief usually coming from the client. Um, Now, what is a brief? Google tells us that it is a set of instructions given to a person about a job or task. We beg to differ. Um, in this respect, we're talking about a lot more than that. Uh, the briefing process is a collaborative process. It's not just a set of instructions. It's about developing an understanding of the journey we want to take. Okay, it's about partnership, and this is where the lines between a client-agency relationship start to gray. We should start thinking ourselves more as partners in an effort of delivering an overall objective. Okay. In this process also, it's really important that we gain clarity right from the word go. And we're, we're very fond of, pushing around buzzwords and terms like driving loyalty. What does that mean? We need to get to the specifics of what it means to drive loyalty. And therefore, you have the block here stating that you want to increase repeat purchase by providing rational motivators such as quality cues versus your competitor. Now, that puts it in a lot more detail and provides a lot more context versus just using the words driving loyalty. We've also heard a lot of times increase value or engage user experience. What about increase both on-site dwell time and conversion to purchase on-site? So if people are walking into, if for instance your client is, let's say a KFC, for instance, what is the aim we want to achieve? You want people to walk into your restaurant, you want them to spend a bit more time there, but you don't just want them to spend time there, you want them to spend time there engaging with your product. So possibly buying some food at least. And that's the outcome that we want. Use speed as a competitive differentiator to drive trial versus you motivating initial purchase by clearly communicating the speed benefits of our product. It's about clarity and it's about detail. Moving further, organizing a brief. What are some of the things that we need to, or the ingredients that need to go into developing a brief? There are some key questions you need to be asking ourselves. What got us here? What is the background to where we are? Why are we where we are now? What have we learned throughout that journey? What are the challenges that the business has gone through? Have we had to increase price, reduce price? Have we lost share? Why have we lost share? Are we losing consumer uptake, for instance? Why is that the case? Um, what are the key information that we need to provide? What's missing within that? So a number of times clients come with a brief. They understand what the problem is. They know that, okay, people are no longer buying their product as much as they used to, but they don't have a feel of what the pulse is or what the issue is, why it is that people are no longer taking their product. It could be that there's a new competitor offering better experience, offering it at a cheaper price. Could it be the macroeconomic conditions? So there's pressure on disposable income. People just want the commodity. They're no longer worried about quality. So your product has a better quality and is at a higher price point, but because there's pressure on disposable income, people would rather just go for what will deliver what they need versus all the frills and the beautiful branding that you've done. So all of that goes into putting the brief out there, but it's absolutely essential that your client is open enough to call out where they don't have certain information that can enrich the process of developing your strategy. Okay. Now, we talked about levels of strategy earlier on. So it's also important that clients put a background to why they are where they are. Perhaps there's a strategy that is driving their action. So what is that strategy? What is the overarching business strategy? Because if we understand that background and that context, we understand where we want to get to, and therefore that helps us in creating the strategy that will help us reach that goal or objective. There are a couple of things that we need to consider. So one of the questions yesterday was that, if I remember correctly, was that is it okay for clients to just send briefs to agencies? Um, for some clients that I know, the recommendation is actually that you have a blueprint of the brief and you have a face-to-face interaction with your agencies and you build the brief together. Because what happens in this process is that certain questions are asked that help enrich the brief, puts a lot more context to it, puts a lot more detail into it, so that we are all aligned from client and agency side as to what we want to achieve and the output we want from the brief. Okay. Oftentimes, a lot of agencies have a lot of questions after a brief is shot to them via email. And now, you have to call clients and say, can we book time to go over the brief, go over the details? If the process is done right, by the time that brief is being sent via email, both agency and client side are on the same page in terms of what the requirements are and what the input is to creating the outcome that we both want. So it's really important that there's that face-to-face interaction. In our current dispensation, that will probably be a virtual briefing session where you probably have a Zoom call such as this to go through what the details are of the brief. And it's only after you've had some of these sessions that there's a final brief that is actually sent via email for action to begin on. It's also really important that we understand the stakeholder agenda. So who are the decision makers when it comes to this brief? Who are the people who need to be informed? Who are the people who need to be consulted? It's really important that that is clearly stated in the brief right from the get-go. Caroline also mentioned agency collaboration, what she termed as the agency council. What you predominantly, or what we will realize as we go along in this presentation, is the fact that media can influence the output of other agencies, especially creative. For instance, a very quick example is that when we realize, looking at the data points that are available to us and the consumer journey that we identify, we're able to tell whether the target engages on certain platforms more than others, or doesn't even engage on certain platforms at all. So it's important that we are moving from the era where a client comes to you and says, I have a radio ad, I have a TV ad, go and place and develop a media strategy for me, versus let's build it together. This is a brief for all agencies. Come back to me with a proposal, come back to me with a big idea, and then we move from there into creation of the content. So in some cases, we're able to come back to clients and come back to the agency council and say, this target that we are trying to change behavior engages on social media more than they do on TV. So you don't need to now spend a lot of budget creating TV content, but create digital content instead, because they engage on that platform a lot more. So there'll be more on that as we go along. It's absolutely important that there's honesty and transparency. I believe a lot of us are conversant with this conversation of the budget line being left empty, and you are told, I don't want to stifle your creativity, think big. I'll give that a moment to sink in. And what essentially happens is that the agencies go off, spend 2 weeks brainstorming, thinking big, and they come back with big ideas, big budget ideas. And then the client now says, okay, how can we achieve that big idea with a budget that is, for lack of a better term, not fit for purpose? So it's absolutely important there's absolute clarity, honesty, and transparency right from the get-go. So if there is no budget to achieve a very lofty idea or achieve a very lofty objective, let's have the conversation with the agency and let the agency know that, okay, you know what, this is what we're going after. We don't have the budget to do it, but we need to think differently and think innovatively and see how we're going to use X amount of budget to deliver this objective. Okay. And for me, that inspires even a lot more than the other way around, where you are asking agencies to think big, then they come back and you tell them this is the budget that's available. That actually is very counteractive. Okay. Now, in this process of having a face-to-face engagement around the briefing process, critical questions come up, and we will talk a lot more about those critical questions. Some of them will come to mind as we go along. One very important ingredient in this process is the need to build trust, and build trust all around. In my experience, especially new relationships between agency and clients, some of the clients are very cautious about how much they open up and how much they give out to the agency, because of concerns around confidentiality, and the fact that in some cases where we've experienced where information has gotten out before it needed to, and competitors are reacting or even launching certain propositions that were in-house and were on the boiling plate to be rolled out. So it's really important that as agencies and as clients, you're building trust across board, because that is the only way that there's the free flow of information that helps develop really brilliant work from briefing through till strategy and execution. So trust, very important. So what are the defining component parts of developing a brief? The first one is the objectives. Where do we want to get to? What are the KPIs? What are the numbers? What do we want to achieve at the end of the day? Okay. It's also really important that we are calling out the key barriers and opportunities within the context or the market. Okay. So you're in a certain category. What are the barriers within that category? What is the market condition? Is it a luxury item? Is it a mass item? What is the predominant conditions within that market or within that space? What are the key drivers of growth? And therefore, what is the business challenge within that? Are they long-term, short-term, and so on and so forth? This is really where you're building the context and building the story and building understanding for the agency, for your business. In most cases, and the way it should be, clients should be experts within their category or their field. But most often than not, that's not the case. There could be situations where you have a new brand manager or new marketing manager who's coming from one industry and entering into another industry, and therefore he or she does not have the experience within the industry. This is where the value of the agency comes in, where if you have prior experience, and I'll take myself for example. I used to work in the beverage industry, and so my knowledge and expertise was really within that space. So I come into agency side, and I'm exposed to a lot more. I'm exposed to the financial sector, and I find myself having to learn a lot of things really quickly to get myself abreast with what's going on within those sectors, because you need that context and that experience to actually make a certain level of impact and have your own hypothesis that you use data to prove or disprove to help you develop a strategy or a solution for your client. So it's really important that you do the research of understanding the category in question or that you're being briefed about. Where your client does not have that, as an agency, you should put in the effort and put in the work to appreciate the category, appreciate how that category works, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities there that will shape your thinking and your strategy going forward. And then the next bit that is really, really, really important is profiling, defining the most valuable target or shopper for the brief in question. Okay, so we're going to tackle each of these big points one after the other, starting with objectives. Okay, so just like strategies and various hierarchies, I remember yesterday actually Patrick mentioned the hierarchy of objectives, and so and for me that was a really profound set of slides, really important. Just like levels of strategies feeding into and feeding from, objectives also feed into and feed from each other. So here you've got, if you're reading from the left, you have your predominantly client-defined objectives, through to the right where you have more agency-defined objectives. Now, it tapers down from left to right in the sense that your client will have a business objective. Their business objective will be mostly around maybe volume or value. They want to make a certain amount of money within a fiscal year, for instance. So that business objective stems from the business strategic decisions that will drive the business. Now, each of your objectives that come out or feed off of that help deliver that. I don't know. Let me just rephrase that. Okay. So your marketing objectives will feed into delivery of the business objectives. So assuming there's a business that has 2 brands, okay, and the target in the fiscal year is to move from selling 90 units to selling 100 units. So that's 10 additional units, right? Your marketing objective will now say, okay, within these 2 brands, I need to get my consumers to buy 10 additional units, right? Now, within marketing, there are 2 brands, right? So each of those brands now have to pick a certain portion of that objective of delivering 10 additional volumes and coming to a point where they are now saying, okay, what do I need to do as a brand from a communication point of view that will get my target to buy X amounts that adds to delivery of these 10 units that the business objective requires. So now you can see how you are feeding into each of them. So as we're progressing toward the right, now you're getting to the point where the client has specifically defined for you the fact that they need to sell 10 additional units. They have noticed what the marketing challenges are. So I have 100 consumers in the market. Only 90% of them are buying me at least once. So that's why I have 90 sales. But now I want to get all 100 to buy a single unit so that I'm selling 100 essentially at the end of the year. So what are the challenges? Perhaps there's a competitor that you have who is selling the 10 other units to the 10 other consumers that are there. Those 10 consumers don't even want to consider you at all, possibly because your product currently does not meet their need. Okay, so a business strategy could be, you know what, we'll just go buy that company off the market, buy them over, and then I have my 100 units. That's one angle. Another angle could be in marketing, we can now innovate and give them a product that meets their need. So if marketing objective now is I'm going to innovate and get a product that meets the need of those 10 consumers that I currently don't have, then you do that. Then your communication objective is I need to create awareness and of this new offering to those 10 consumers to be able to get them to buy me so that I have 100% of the market. Now, your media objective clearly is that you need to use your media to engage those 10 people so that they can consider you, try your product, and essentially now convert to buying your product. So at this point here, where you're getting into the media space, because you've clearly communicated what your business objective is, what marketing objective needs to be able to feed into that, and what the communication objective is, the agency is now able to define for you and tell you that, okay, yes, to be able to deliver this, knowing the consumer, you need to reach them this number of times at this location on these channels to be able to deliver the outcome that you want of selling 10 units to the 10 consumers that are currently not within your consumption set. Hopefully that is clear. We'll go further to just give some examples and context around how these objectives come together. So your business objective really will talk around what are the financial goals that need to be delivered. So an example of that would be drive business growth by 10%. We'll come back to these examples shortly. Then your marketing objective. So you want to drive 10% growth, yeah? Now, what is the key behavioral change needed in a consumer to achieve this business goal? So the marketing objective is coming out of the business objective to see how they can deliver the business objective. Now, an example of that is drive penetration by attracting new consumers to the brand. Okay. Another example is you can appeal to competitor X consumers. So there's a competitor who's selling to a certain consumer who's not currently within your consumption set. You want to appeal to them to sway them from consuming brand X to come and consume yours. Okay, so that's a marketing objective. Now, what does the communication objective mean? What do we need the consumers to think, feel, or do to create the change that feeds into this marketing objective? So your comms objective says raise awareness in order to drive trial, or make competitor X consumers feel closer to us and consider us versus competitor X. So what is the media objective that emanates from your communication objective? How does media deliver the comms objective? Essentially, maximize coverage of a wider audience to draw in new consumers, so drive more reach. Okay, so here are the examples. Now, what makes an objective a good objective? You've all heard about the acronym of SMART objective or SMART goals. So your goals need to be specific, they need to be measurable, they need to be achievable, realistic, and timely. Okay, so let's take a quick look back at this example we had. So here the example was drive business growth by 10%. That does not give enough context. Okay, 10% of what? What is your current market share? And it doesn't give an idea of what the time frame would be. Is it within a period of 3 months, or is it over a period of 1 year? So it's not specific enough. How are we going to measure this? There's no way of really measuring. Perhaps you're going to use audit data. In some cases, it's also important that you give a context of where you are currently. If you are perhaps at a 40% share of the market now, and you're saying you want to grow by 10%, that puts you now at 50%. That's probably more achievable than you are at 80%, and you want to see a leapfrog from 80 to 90%. Again, it depends on the market context and the dynamics in the market. Okay, so within that, we don't have a way of telling whether this 10% growth is actually realistic or not, and whether it is achievable. And then there's no sense of time frame, so you're not sure what it is. So really important that you're putting out SMART objectives and challenging your clients to be able to provide that level of detail, so that you're both aligned as to what the objectives are. Another dimension to it, and the reason why it's important to have SMART objectives, is, do you think that what you have there as an objective can realistically be achieved? One, is there enough budget for the job? So an example, a lot of clients have a strategy in terms of a minimum standard they want to achieve from a media standpoint. So some of them, one such example could be that we as a business, we want our brands to be top of mind for our consumers. And so therefore, in every campaign that you do, you ensure that you're getting a minimum reach of 80% at one. Meaning, at any point in time, you need to make sure that 80% of your consumer base can actually attest to the fact that they have seen or heard your ad at least once. Now, looking at that ambition, you can, reverse engineer and come back to what that means in terms of budgetary figure. So if you're looking for a minimum standard of 80% at one, what that means for you within your market with the data available to you, you're able to target what number of their consumers are within that market. And if we work that back, how much does that mean in actual dollars to reach those consumers 80% of the time, at least once? And so if they give you a brief and you know the size of the target and you do that math and the budget does not meet expectations, you have to bring that up. And there has to be a conversation about where, therefore, are we going to land from a media KPI point of view? Are we okay with, instead of 80%, doing a 60% at one, because the budget can only get us to that level of 60% at one? The other thing to consider is there, looking at your constraints and the fact that the budget might not be realistic to achieve the objective at hand, could we make a business case to get more money? And where is that going to come from? There are limited resources. Some of them are invested in other initiatives. Does it mean something has to give? What is the opportunity cost of that? We need to have that conversation, and it has to be an open conversation with the client. So where else is the client spending, and what are the results coming out of that? Some of these conversations can be very prolonged and at multiple levels. So where the brand manager and you are not able to conclude that conversation, it's just a point of making it clear that, you know what, the budget you provided versus the objective you want to get to, there's a disparity. So let's have a conversation about that and align and have a compromise and decide what we're going to do. Okay. In most cases also, there is need for further research and further evaluation to get a better understanding of what the conditions in the market are. Do we know what the motivation in the market is? A case in point could be that in the past maybe 3 months, for instance, all conditions being the same, your usual volume has gone down by 30%. That is a massive fall in volume. So every month you sell an average of 10 units. Then out of the blue, for the last 3 months, you're selling 7. But the client is not able to pinpoint what the reason for that is. All data sources available to them indicate that their competitor is still at the same level in terms of share. It's not like they are stealing share from them. So you're not sure where that volume is going. Economic conditions are the same. So what is the cause of this drop in volume? At that point, you need to investigate further. The client could either commission the research, or the agency can commission that on behalf of the client and bill for it. Okay. Another key ingredient of this whole process of briefing is data. It takes data for the client to tell you the story about where they are and where they want to get to. And it also takes data for the agency to come back and say, this is the solution for the problem that you've identified. And these are the data points that back the proposal I am giving to you. We've moved from the days of guesswork and gut feel. So it's a combination of art and science now. The art being the bit around understanding consumer behavior, having a gut feel about how people will react to advertising stimulus. And then there's the science of saying that, you know, past experiences and past campaigns have delivered these number of or this effect, and therefore on the basis of that, if we implemented this strategy, it would deliver so and so result. So there are various types of data points. There are documented ones, and then there are your live data sources that are aided by technology and the fact that the internet provides a lot more insights around consumer behavior on an ongoing basis. So your client would, you know, delve into their first-party data, which would include things like sales data, their segmentation, they understand category users. Then there's third-party data like your TNS, Kantar, and Nielsen type data that goes into your retail audit type data, telling you that, okay, you know what, these are the number of units of all products that were sold in the market. These are the number of retailers or shops that are holding the stock. These are the stock cover days. This is the one that is running off the shelf. This is the rate of sale and those kind of things. It provides you with a better understanding of the category and whether your product is in accelerated growth, stagnating, or in decline. Okay, so it's really important that we know that. Then, of course, you have your more macroeconomic and microeconomic data that tells you what is the financial landscape within the market. Is disposable income seeing a boom? Is it increasing, or is there pressure on disposable income? Are people having to make choices, focus more on their needs versus their wants because of the category you sit in? Are you a need category or you're in a wants category? So your more leisure type, self-actualization, luxury goods could suffer in where there's an economic downturn. Okay, so let's take an example of the current context that we're in with the COVID disruption and everything. So this is the time that is very unlikely that real estate will be booming. Okay, because people are thinking about what to eat and how to survive the next day, and so they might not be thinking about buying a new car now. So it's important to have all that context, and the data helps put it in context that yes, actually, the real estate market has seen a 30% drop from $5 billion to so and so as a result of the COVID pandemic. So all of this data puts things in context for you. Then we come down to where we're now looking at more consumer type data. Ipsos data will give you your media consumption, your competitor analysis from exposure and spend point of view. Then we talked about the more live data that now talks about your traffic, Twitter conversations, what's hashtag, what is the temperature of conversations online regarding your category or regarding your brand specifically. What are your engagement levels on your social media platforms? What are people searching for online? Is it relevant to your category? And if they search, does your brand come up first and things like that? Then you have social listening tools like Keyhole and so on and so forth. So there's a pitfall that we need to watch out for in this area of getting data. There can be data or information overload. So it's important that you are looking for data that is relevant to the brief, relevant to the category, affects the category or affects the brand in one way or the other, and will affect the achievement of the objective. Really important. Your consumer data is really important in the sense, and we're going to get to that point where we talk about the target consumer, because the consumer data tells you what, or leads you to the point you understand what the motivations for your consumer is, what their pain points are, what puts them from a passive to an active mode in terms of your category and things like that. And then your media type data starts talking to you about their touch points, what they engage with at whatever time of the day. Okay. So we've talked about objectives and putting that in context. Now let's look at the key ingredient throughout the process. At the end of the day, businesses want to reach people, and they want people to take a certain action that hopefully, or most often than not, is in favor of their brand. Okay, so it's really important that you get the definition of the target consumer right, both from client side and agency side. And so you're defining the source of business. So who is your most valuable target? And this is the person or the profile that will help you deliver your business objective. Okay. It's also important that you understand the key points in their experience journey. Patrick mentioned that yesterday. The experience journey is how are they moving from not being aware that you even exist as a brand to being aware, to considering you, to trying you, to the point where they are repeat purchasers of you, or light users to the point where they are staunch fans and advocates of your brand. Okay, and then what are the other key observable data points around them that leads us to understand them a bit more? So from client side, um, I have fallen for this before, and I am guilty of doing this before, where you just define the target consumer as females 18 to 34-year-olds living in Accra, Kumasi, and Takoradi. That is not enough. To really get to the point where we have a full understanding of the target, what makes them tick, and what differentiates them from other groups, and why they are your most valuable target, it's important that we're putting a lot more detail around the persona and the profile of the target. Okay, so when you're looking at a target like a female aged 18 to 34, do they have children? Do they not? Are they married? Are they single? What is their mindset? What is their motivation? What keeps them going, or what puts them down? Are they Caucasian, Black, or Hispanic? For beauty brands, are they brunette, blonde, or natural Afro? Again, what is your most valuable target, and how detailed can you define them? Are they light users or heavy users? Okay. In some cases, your brief will be specific and tell you that I have people who are heavy users. This brief is not to address them. I want to attract the people who are light users and make them heavy users. So clearly, you are differentiating between the two groups of people. So you're looking at what makes someone a light user and what is preventing them from becoming a heavy user. And then you're trying to overcome that barrier by whatever means that your strategy will help you do to get to the point where they are heavy users and they are delivering value for the brand. So a light user might use your product once every 3 months, but the heavy user uses it once every month. So clearly, there's a business value there in getting a light user to become a heavy user, in the sense that you're achieving a sales of 2 additional units per individual versus just one engagement with the brand over a period of 3 months. So it's important that you, as clients and agencies, we are absolutely clear on who the target is. There are various levels, again, when it comes to the target consumer, and Patrick touched on this briefly. Is the target the end user, or an influencer, or a shopper? A perfect example of that would be your perhaps diaper category or baby food category. So the baby doesn't go to the shop to go and buy the diapers or buy the baby food. The mother does. So understanding that, yes, much as it's not the mother who's going to use the product, the baby is the one going to get the benefit of the product, but there are elements that drive the motivation of choice for the mother. And therefore, it's important that we call that out, and define who the primary target is and who the secondary target is. Okay. So it goes without saying that before you start your strategy, you should have aligned with your client who the target audience is. And that is the starting point of whether the strategy is going to succeed or not. If you get the target audience mark wrong, whatever else follows, you're missing the mark. Okay, so the target audience is key to delivering the business objective. And so as an agency and client partner, you need to absolutely align on who that key target is for the brand. So we know who the target is now, but do we understand what they go through in their daily lives, and what drives their choice, and how they engage with the category or the brand throughout the day? It's also important that you understand their barriers to purchase, or the opportunities that you can leverage to get them to engage with your product. And so it's important to understand that journey. In some cases, the journey is about a day in the life, depending on the category that you find yourself. So if you are a snack brand that is targeting students, you want to understand during the day, from morning till evening, where are they in their passive stage, and when are they in the active stage and actively looking for your brand, and in what context is it best to engage with them, so that they see you and choose you ahead of competition. So that's one example. Then there's also the bit around the conversion funnel, which is right here. So how are people moving from the state of being aware of the brand to where they are switching into consideration stage, and they are open to now trying the brand? Is it on premise or off premise type of? And let me explain that in a bit more detail. So, is your category a brand that you consume at home, or so? Let's use the alcohol category, for instance. So in Ghana, we know that generally the trend has been that alcohol consumption is done mostly on premise, so in the bar or in the outlet or in the pub, in the club. A small percentage of that is at home. But we're increasingly seeing, and considering COVID and all the issues that it had, you would notice that in the last couple of months, a lot of the consumption will happen at home. So clearly, what that means is now, how do you move from your awareness stage into a consideration and trial stage, where now the consumption is no longer going to happen on premise, but more off premise, and that has to drive your strategy. Okay, how do they move from the trial stage, and how can you enable them become repeat purchasers? Okay, are you available everywhere from a distribution point of view, that you are overcoming that barrier of them not being able to find you when they try you, and they are amenable to continue engaging with you? So all of that comes in, and then to the point where they become advocates. When they are advocates, are you giving them the opportunity to actively advocate for you or passively advocate for you, to the point where a lot of people can hear them and appreciate the fact that they have a positive disposition towards your brand, and that can influence other people to be able to engage with your brand. So all of that is really essential in defining the journey. Again, as clients should have expertise in appreciating this, but in some cases they do not. So your critical questions will help them understand that, okay, actually, I need to get closer to this to appreciate how my consumers go through the conversion funnel, from awareness to the point where they are fully converted and become advocates. Now, through all of that, for purposes of developing your media strategy, what are the things you should be looking out for in that journey? Is that what channels or connections do they engage with through the journey? Okay, so a day in the life, you wake up in the morning, what happens to this target? Are they the kind of target that wake up, first thing they do is pick up their phone and check their WhatsApp or check Facebook? Is your category relevant for that time period to the point where you are engaging them? For instance, if you're a breakfast brand, do you want to start placing your ads at that point to engage them so that they choose you in the morning as the breakfast brand? Those are things you need to consider as your media engagement platforms, and in understanding this target a bit more. Okay. Also, what are the barriers, triggers, and how do they react to external stimuli? Again, understanding the target. So it's the point here, the outcome of this whole exercise and analysis of the target is that when you understand the target, you gain insights. Okay. Again, Patrick spoke about insights. He spoke about it extensively. Insights, again, are the aha moment, the cause is now the understanding of why there are certain consumer behaviors, and therefore you know that when you change something with that information, with that insight, you get a reaction. And the reaction is what you want to help you deliver your business objective. Okay, so target understanding and insight drives your media strategy, among other things. The other things is now I mentioned earlier, and Caroline alluded to that yesterday when she mentioned the agency council and media first thinking. So when you have an understanding of your target and the touch points they engage with, and the word I'm using here is touch points, which is not just about media, but connections and how they relate to the category. Those insights help the development of content that is relevant to the consumer. We'll touch on that briefly as we go along also. But the key thing is it helps take away inefficiencies. So instead of the creative agency going and building a high budget 60-second TVC, perhaps what you actually need is just a squeeze back on TV, a GIF image, because maybe the target just engages with TV 2 hours of the whole day, or maybe 2 hours of the whole week actually. So there's a very small window and you don't need to spend so much in that regard. That money that, media businesses, we like money. So that money that you use to create the TVC can be applied to other media sources such as digital. Again, if the target engages a lot with digital. Okay, good. So I mentioned this briefly. It's really important that you steer away from information overload. Okay, it can be a challenge sifting through all levels of information to derive actionable insights. But it is not the way to go to just gather data, just gather, and then you say, oh, you end up wasting the time. So the guidance in that regard is that the data will not always just give you an insight. The insight will not just jump out at you sometimes. In some cases, it's about going back to the objective and looking at the target and the data that you have and information you have about the target and how they relate to the category and so on and so forth, and create a hypothesis and say, okay, perhaps this could be why this is happening. Then you look at the data points and the patterns. In some cases, when you combine the data, it enriches your outlook and shows you a certain pattern that you can now glean an insight from. So this point here is really, it can be understated. Understanding is deeper than knowledge. And just like that, in our normal everyday human relations, a lot of people know you, but not a lot of them understand you and why you do the things you do sometimes. Okay, so it's absolutely important that your analysis is driven by your need to understand why the consumer does certain things. And as Patrick mentioned yesterday, the key to that is asking why until you hit Google and you say, aha, so this is why. Okay, good. So how there's no one true science to getting insights. Insights are all around us, and some guidance as to how to get to that point is looking at certain resources like TED. TED has a lot of videos on there that can help you just appreciate a lot of varied opinions and varied points of view about various sectors. Then the Futures Company also provides that. Contagious is also a very good resource to do that. As a business, Dentsu Aegis, we invest in a lot in data and technology to help us glean data and gain insights out of that. So a lot of agencies also have their ways around that. But these are free resources that as a strategist you can just keep inspiring yourself on. Okay. So after we spent all this time, again, I've spoken about this, but just to buttress the point, after spending the time mining the insights and understanding the target, As a strategist, as a media strategist, don't just focus on media. There are times when my outfit has created a lot of big ideas that originally are not media ideas. But because we understand the objective, we created those ideas to the point where they will be executed by either the creative, the experiential, or the digital agency. But we use our media channels and to give it scale. Because the bottom line is you want to give the client, you want to give the consumer a good experience. Now, if that experience is done and hidden, mass communication does not play a role in giving that exposure and reaching more targets. You don't get the effect that you want. So in some cases, we realized that a lot of the briefs were not just about putting media out there. It was about creating the right level of experience, and so our ideas were generated around creating that right experience, then using the media vehicles to give it scale. Okay, so in developing your strategy, think connections, not just media, and share this with your agency counsel. Okay, I think just one thing to touch on, insights. Some insights are timeless, but some of them also change over time. Um, Mostly due to technology. One insight today could be very relevant, but tomorrow technology finds a solution, and that insight no longer becomes an insight really, because there's a solution to it. So no example immediately comes to mind, but I hope we appreciate that point. Okay, so the process is collaborative. Let's remember that. And so let us share after building trust as a foundation on which we are all working towards one objective. So now that we've talked about and defining the problem and understanding the various parts of it, we move into the creation phase. At this point, we're not going to spend too much time on this. Um, A great strategy ensures all solutions ladder up to the delivery of the business objective and is rooted in consumer insight. So we've come this far, uh, by which point we should have at least one insight or some insights as to why the problem of the brief is there, and therefore we have an idea of steering what the solution would be from a strategy point of view. So the insights we've gained will give us you will give us tasks that communication has to solve, and it gives us a steer as to how to reach, engage, and convert the target. That is really important. Then we move into the phase where you're now creating your strategic statement. So here, this is a framework we use at Dinsu Ages, where we distill what the strategy would be in one statement. Once we're able to do that, it gives us a single focus to go through. So you're getting your valuable target. If you have defined them right, you'll be on point there. You understand their mindset. You want them to perform a certain outcome. So to deliver the outcome, which will be in delivery of the objective, and then by what is the proposition? Okay, what is the insight telling us that we need to do? And that's that. The buy aspect of the statement is really where your strategy comes through. Okay, when you have your strategy statement, then you go into ideation. So it's bringing the strategy to life, creating brand experiences for people. This is the spark that really triggers innovation. Okay, there are different types of ideas. It could be a media and content idea. So perhaps the issue is that your client is not reaching the target as often as they should on the right platforms. So your idea now helps the client deliver content that is relevant to the target on the right platforms on a regular basis. It could be an activation idea, which could be a sponsorship or a brand experience that the consumer engages with physically or virtually. Okay, it could be a utility idea, so e-commerce ideas, distribution channels, service platforms, and so on and so forth. It could also be a contextual framework. So time of day, the client, the consumer has moved from a passive phase into an active phase. So you're offering triggers. through media to make sure that they are, moving that dial from being passive, active, and then choosing your brand instead of competition? Is it about a place? So are they on their way to a location and then you put a billboard or an ambient media that just brings you top of mind and drives them to choose you versus competition? Is it about motivation? What state of mind are they in, and therefore does your idea enable that? Okay, so that's ideation. If we don't create communications idea, then simply our job as media agencies and our strategy will just be around making sure that the ad is on the right platform at the right time for the consumer to engage with. Then really you haven't added value as an agency. So the idea is where the magic comes through. Okay, so we're not just as media strategists, we're not just there to place ads on the right channels. Yes, it could be the case, but bring some additional spark to it. Okay, so ideas bring the strategy to life, but remember that they need to be they need to be real, they need to be relevant, they need to resonate, and they need to deliver a reaction, and that reaction should be in service of delivering the business objective. Okay, so where there's now your strategy is, there's this term that has been used, your strategy is as good as the execution. Your strategy is a plan. It's a plan of action. But if that plan is not put into action and executed, it just remains a strategy and you don't achieve the objective. So in activating, we look at what we call a framework we call the 4 C's. So are you choosing the most effective channels at the right time that the client will engage with? Okay. What kind of content have you influenced the content? Okay, is that content relevant for the target? What's the context? Is it during a passive or an active phase? Yeah, context is very key. The message has to be right at the right time to elicit the required level of response that you want. And then connections. I already talked about connections. It's not just about media, but think beyond channels. Think in terms of interactions that consumers will have with our ecosystem or touch points at each stage of their relationship with the brand or at each stage during the day. Really important. Good. Another thing is that we are moving from a point where you've done the strategy, you just hand it off to the media execution team, and then you fold your hands and wait for the next brief. As a strategist, you need to follow the strategy and make sure that it's being implemented. Conditions could change. There could be external factors. COVID could happen. If COVID happens, your strategy is no longer relevant because a lot of things have changed. Yeah. So from post-completion analysis, we need to move into live campaign analysis where you're watching that. So members of my team are on the call. I know they will hold me to account on this because this is not something that I have done judiciously, but it's really a practice that we need to keep going. It's really important that you've gone with a strategy to the client and told him that this is how you want to achieve the objective. As it goes along, be checking regularly and give an update. If things change, nothing's well. You go back to the client and say, okay, you know what, this was a strategy, but this has happened. Your competitor has reacted this way. So this is how we're going to tweak the strategy a little bit to make sure that we are still delivering the objective and maybe we are getting a bit more of a windfall. Okay. So once all is said and done, strategy is approved, it's been executed, campaign is done. Always go back to the client and check the business objective, was it delivered? Your marketing objective, was it delivered? Your brand health tracker, your brand love scores, are they where you wanted them to be? If they are not, what are the learnings that we can take that will be applied to the next round of briefing and the next strategy that we build? Akbar, thank you very much. I'm open to questions now.
All right, thank you, Adam. And yeah, if you have any questions, please send them in. Uh, okay, yeah. I guess the questions will come in because you've dealt with so many things, and I'll be surprised if there are no questions. Well, yeah, that's it. I think there's a question. Yeah, this from Georgina, and she's okay. She just a comment. I'm enlightened here. No. Okay, just comments. Yeah, everybody's excited with your presentation. Emmanuel says, thanks very much for this lovely presentation. And then he says he has a follow-up question, so we wait for that.
Okay.
Yeah, please, Emmanuel, go ahead. Or you want to speak? Okay, yeah, I think he wants to speak, yeah.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, Emmanuel.
Yeah, good morning.
Okay, so thank you for the presentation. It was very impactful. Yesterday, I had some questions that were left unanswered, so I thought I would bring it back to the session today. And it's in terms of insight and post-campaign evaluation. So I wanted to ask, in terms of post-campaign evaluation, what are the key indicators or metrics that proves that we had a good or bad campaign? And I'm talking about traditional media.
Okay. I think, Patrick, would you like to come in? Because it's based on yesterday's question.
Sorry, if you don't mind, Namdi, if you could repeat what the question was.
Emmanuel, please, could you repeat your question?
Okay, I said in terms of post-performance evaluation, so let's say we have a campaign that was executed and we were done with the execution of the campaign. So we want to measure the efficiency of this. What are the key indicators or metrics that proves that we had a good or bad campaign? So are we talking about the GRPs, the total GRPs reached? Are we talking about the reach percentage? Like how do we really determine that we had an effective campaign? So that's my question.
Okay, I would want you to visualize the hierarchy of objectives, starting from the business to marketing to communication and then to media. Right. Typically in media, you will have objectives of what you're supposed to be delivering from a campaign perspective. So if it is, GRPs, reach, so on and so forth, going back to comms objective, probably they would be in the range of maybe GRPs or maybe, in terms of awareness and fine aspects of communication, it could be, intent and so on and so forth. So what is important is from your perspective, if you are presenting a media, outfit, your objective is definitely to deliver on first is definitely compliances. So if you plan for a certain amount of quantity, compliance of that quantity is primarily very important. Because I did mention yesterday that, we do not have the money to overspend, but at the same time, if we do an under delivery of the campaign expectation, it's not going to help. Meaning, if you're supposed to be talking to somebody 3 times and if you've spoken to people 2 times, your job is not done because you actually wasted that money by speaking to somebody 2 times where you were supposed to be speaking to somebody 3 times from a frequency point of view. So it is important that you identify the quantity. Second is you try to identify what is the GRP level you delivered. So, in media, typically a plus and minus 5% is acceptable because you cannot be so accurate that you will deliver exactly the same GRPs. Okay, over a period of time, if you are confident and if the data which you are working on is helping you, then definitely you will be able to be closer to maybe actual with a little variance. But a window of or a variance of 5% plus or minus is agreeable. So that's basically what you have to do is your GRPs. Then third is basically your reach. Okay, because whatever you do, sometimes you may underinvest in terms of GRPs. That possibly could lead to some kind of savings, which is good. But if you delivered on your reach KPIs and on your frequency KPIs, then your job is done. So those are the primary things which you should focus on. Okay. After having done that, what is important is, again, we're not just here to deliver transactionally, meaning we're not here to kind of just say, okay, you told me 300 GRPs, 50% at 4 plus, I'm delivering. No, your job is not just media planning, but you're also representing an overall value creation, so to say. So you're definitely there for the client to tell them, what is the value bringing to the table, which is basically what differentiates you versus maybe other agencies in the market. And that's where you'll try to explain, look, I've got you so much of, I gave you the formula of how do you want to deliver innovation, which is basically what did you do to deliver impact, what did you do to deliver attention, the combination of tools where you delivered some kind of innovations to the client. So what is the value which you're basically creating for the client, right? So value creation. So almost like you're telling the client that, look, this is what I did for you. For example, it could be maybe in a form of a gratis inventory, or it could be in form of maybe some kind of placement which was so efficient and so effective that it got attention, and therefore you may want to basically showcase that. So those are the things. After having done what we are supposed to be doing from a media agency's point of view, which is basically planning as well as buying, you then of course will have to ensure that, is my campaign helping the needle move? For example, it could be from an awareness of X to an awareness of Y. It could be an intention from X to Y. It could be whatever, you've basically been able to move that. So that's basically what you have to focus on. Having done that, you've basically taken the responsibility of media KPIs, then your communication KPIs. How did it deliver on the marketing KPIs? Did the intent, for example, yesterday's example was on the biscuit category, that we wanted moms to consider, this as a healthy alternatives. If that was so, then, or maybe we wanted to increase maybe market share. What happened to the market share? So basically, it all goes bottom up, and we have to focus on whether is whatever I've done, has it met those KPIs. Now, while you do that, there, it seems like almost everything is done post and maybe after the campaign is over, maybe 15 days later, 1 month later. But there are certain things which you can do, which are basically with brand lifts. So let's say, for example, if you activate brand lift with YouTube in your market, and you may want to look at, okay, I wanted to basically look at intent to buy my brand. Maybe I want to look at maybe some communication KPIs to basically to do with awareness. So has the awareness gone up? So, it's almost like how YouTube does their brand lift with a controlled and an exposed. So to the control is where the questions are asked later, but to the exposed is what question basically is asked. Sorry, to the control and to the exposed, these are two groups to whom questions are asked before and after. And the contrast then tells basically whether have you been able to meet those KPIs, so to say, from your brand point of view. So there are many things which you can do, but it's a very important question, and depends how bold you are in asking that question to your client. Sometimes, not sometimes, most often you will get a brief. After having read the brief and after having submitted the strategy, it's a question which you should ask to yourself. Okay, will I define my campaign to be successful? Okay, and then it's up to you to basically go back to your client and say, look, I consider 1, 2, 3, 4, if done, my campaign will be successful. Are you aligned with that? So you're basically having a joint alignment with the client. So what are the measures of success? How will you define your campaign which is successful? Sometimes when you're trying to say that, or maybe you're trying to phrase it in a manner by reading the brief, client will tell you something else. Okay, and that something else is very important. Sometimes they may tell you, look, I want quality leads, or whatever it may be. I want basically people to download the mobile app. I want, so that want is something which you have to capture. While you capture the want, I would want you to focus on the desire. Sometimes these are the words which are not spoken, but something you have to read from what the client is saying. And that's where you have to understand the client's ambition. Something basically, what is this client who wants to deliver what is written in black and white, but also wants to deliver something, and that something is very important. I sometimes laugh, but sometimes we call them corporate GRPs. My boss stays on so and so street, I want to deliver corporate GRP. So you have to be very careful of those things. So maybe that of course is not a measure of success, but sometimes while you understand their wants and needs, you also focus on what the desire of the brand manager is, and therefore try to deliver. It's important that you ask that question to the client once you've been confident that you read the brief and you are super confident that if let me now go and ask, because if the client was to quiz me, I know this is what has been written in the brief. Sometimes the client might tell you one or two things, which possibly are not written, but they may come as a surprise to you, and then you can go back. You'll always go back post the campaign and see, you know what, you didn't tell me. But it's always better to clarify, because that's how you build your bonding, and that's how you ensure that you deliver on clients' objectives as well as their brief subject.
I don't know if I can come in here and just add one of the last things, just in addition to what Patrick has said, is at the end of your campaign, or pretty much regularly, as a media planner or a strategist, always ask your clients how they're doing in terms of whatever business objectives they have. So if it's sales in terms of value or volume, like Adam had mentioned. So just regularly checking. So yes, you could be hitting all your KPIs from a media standpoint, but also, just try to find out if it's, driving the required change that the client is expecting. And if you do all of these things, you should be able to have a very good idea of how your campaign is performing in terms of if it's positive or if there are things that you need to tweak or improve upon.
Okay, that's enough. I think I'm satisfied with the answer. Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you.
All right, yeah, thank you. Okay, there's another question from Georgina Bimpong. Yeah. What strategies would you prescribe for post-COVID? I don't know if you need other things to be added to these questions, or is it clear enough?
I think so. So post-COVID, the truth is, we all have a sort of projection as to what it would be. We're calling it the new normal. The truth is, we're not sure when life will come back to normalcy before COVID. So from a brand point of view, you need to look at what category you fit into first, before you start analyzing how, therefore, you put yourself out there. There are brands that clearly will definitely view e-commerce and digital platforms as a mainstay going forward, because they've seen the benefit of that during the COVID era. So there's no one straight answer. It depends on the category you find yourself in, the service, and therefore how you now put yourself out there from a strategy point of view.
Okay, thank you. All right, earlier I was trying to ask a question on the A/B testing. I was thinking what size the sample population for A and the sample population for B, what kind of percentage do you need to use to get a proper, to be sure that that your answers are valid? For instance, if you send to the whole of the population in sample A, would you be sending the message to them again? Or would you choose a small segment of sample A and send it to them, choose a small sample of sample B and send it to them? And how do you choose those that you're going to send the messages to in the test? Yeah, this should be to Patrick, because
let me answer that. So typically in A/B testing, something is constant and something is variable. Okay, so constant, let's say I want to do a constant, which is because you're trying to measure, if I was to give a similar input to the two creators, what will be the outcomes? Okay, so you define a budget for an A/B test, and that gets equally split between the two creators. And then you define the audiences whom you want. And then basically you would want to maybe test for engagement, or you may want to test for maybe reach, or you may want to test for maybe cost per impression, CPM, or whatever it is. So those are the variables, I would say. So there will be a constant and there will be a variable, but it has to be equal, which means you cannot test one creative for a larger audience and one creative for a small audience. Then you're not being because that will define the investment behind the two creators, which of course is going to be one is less and one is higher. So there has to be something constant, which is either a budget or either an audience. Let's say, for example, if I have an audience which is constant, I've defined 2 audiences as constant, and I would want to test maybe 2 different creators. So the 2 different creators become variable over there. So that's how we do A/B testing.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Let me see if there's another question. Okay. Biode says we need more sessions like this. Yeah, well, can't see any more questions. So is there, okay. Is there anything you want to add? Demola, would you like to come in before we round up?
I think everyone has, I mean, between Adam, Patrick, I mean, all the panelists, I think we've pretty much covered all the elements.
Okay. All right. Someone is asking if we're going to have the presentations shared. Sure, they will be on the website, creativeclub.com. And if you check the archive by Monday, you should have the recordings of the 2 days. Okay, so I think it's time to call it a wrap. We've had an exciting 2 days of presentations. We've had presentations from Edem Zokoto, Chief Strategy Officer, Dentsu Aegis Network Ghana, Demola Salami, Associate Director, Planning and Strategy, Brand Eye Media Lagos, Aristide Mabato, Client Services Director, ACMA Media Group, Douala, Cameroon, Caroline Ndirango, Business Unit Head, iProspect Nairobi, Kenya, and Patrick Gomes, CEO, Digitex Plus, Lagos, Nigeria. So our next session for October will be techniques of storytelling. Of course, that's focused more on the creative area, but you know, in this industry, I always say everybody needs to be involved with everything because you can't really tell where the boundary is. So I welcome all of you to join us again in October. Thank you all for attending, and bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Nandi, for having us. Pleasure being with the audience and with my other co-speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nandi.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.